Bojo and hello, I'm James and I'll be your host for this season of the Everyday Forum podcast, an original Stratfest at Home podcast showcasing a sampling of the thought-provoking discussions from the Stratford Festival's 2025 Meighen Forum, the festival within the festival designed to enhance and contextualize the performances in the main Stratford Festival season. The following discussion was recorded in front of a live audience in Lazaretus Hall at the Patterson Theatre in Stratford, Ontario, Canada. Enjoy!
Good morning, everyone. It's so great to see everybody out today, and I'm thrilled that you're here. Welcome to the Forum. Welcome to the Stratford Festival. My name is Julie Miles, and I am the Meighen Forum Director. It is a privilege to gather here today on this beautiful territory, which has been the site of human activity, conversations, and storytelling for many thousands of years. And we wish to honor the ancestral guardians of this land and its waterways, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, and the Attawandarunk. Today, many Indigenous peoples continue to call this land home and act as its stewards, and this responsibility extends to all peoples to share and care for this land for generations to come. From the lovable and determined Anne Shirley, to the sensible Dashwood sisters, to the women of Greece who take matters into their own hands to get things done, women are a driving force in our stories and plays this season. So it seemed very fitting to invite Dr. Jen Gunter to the Meighen Forum this season as our special guest, as she is one of the world's foremost advocates for women and women's health. Having been called the internet's OBGYN, often debunking the misinformation that plagues the internet now, she's the author of 3 best-selling books and is the creator of The Vagenda, an evidence-based internet hub for reproductive health matters. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, USA Today, and Self, and her books have been on the New York Times bestseller list. And lucky for you today, we are selling a number of her books in the lobby, and after our talk this morning, she is available to sign your books too. Joining Dr. Gunter on stage is our own local powerhouse and leading actor, Meighen Beattie. This year marks Meiv's 9th season. It's Meiv's 9th season at Stratford, and she plays Rachel Lynde in Anne of Green Gables and Penelope and Odysseus in Ransacking Troy. So please put your hands together and join me in welcoming to the stage Dr. Jen Gunter and Meighen Beattie.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to start, I have a little surprise for you. So we're going to start with a little gift. It's actually not a gift, it's just a loaner.
Okay.
It's just a loaner. But we wondered if you wanted to drink your water from this today. For those of you who can't see, this says,
Bitch, I'm from Winnipeg.
So the reason I'm loaning you this mug is because the woman whose mug this is here today, and she also happens to be named Jen. It's the great actress Jen Villaverde, who's in our season this year, and she brought this specially for you to use. And she happens, this is why I didn't tell you backstage, what a coincidence. She happens to play Miss Stacy in Anne of Green Gables. And not 45 seconds ago, Dr. Gunter was singing, "Open the window, sweep out the cobwebs."
You remember that?
From Anne of Green Gables, the musical, which is that Miss Stacy's song?
Yes, it's when she's like coming into the classroom and yeah.
I can't tell you how much sense that makes to me, that you would be singing Miss Stacy's song, living in Avonlea all season as I do. I'm going to put this on your station.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you.
So, because to me, Miss Stacy brings something invigorating and vital and natural and honest to Avonlea, which is a place maybe before her arrival that might have been a bit tight and maybe suppressed and old-fashioned. And you're like Miss Stacy. Like, that's just perfect. It is an absolute honor and thrill and delight to have you with us today. I've been a big fan for a long time. I've spent a lot of time with you, unbeknownst to you.
Well, and I'm just so thrilled to be here, and just for the this is old stomping grounds for me because I did my residency in London, so I just feel like I'm back at home.
Incredible. Well, okay. So speaking of back at home, that's how I wanted to start because, as I like to say, bitch stands for being in total control of herself. And you are from Winnipeg. You aren't living in Winnipeg now, but I hear, rumor has it, you're coming home to us. And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about that.
Yes. Yeah, so for the first time since 1995, I have a Canadian address again, so that's great. We bought a home on Vancouver Island, and I'll be moving back for good in July. We've been going back and forth. My husband got his permanent residency, woo! And so we'll be going. I'll be back and forth until July, and then back in July for good. And one of my sons goes to school here, and my other son is going to be applying for his to a couple of MFA programs here. So we're all
terrific.
repatriated.
Yay. So, yeah. So I wanted to ask you about moving back here because, we have been talking, you and I in our pre-time together, our pre-interview, about the North American situation at the moment with, particularly with health and regulations. Can you tell me, in terms of your decision to move back to Canada, how does that play out with your professional interests and your very, very much, as I've gotten to know you a little bit, global awareness of priorities?
Yeah, so I'd always wanted to move back when I finished working where I was working, and my kids were out of school. You've got things you got to finish, and then I told my husband about where I wanted to go, and he goes, "Oh, that looks like a beautiful place, sure." Because none of our kids were going to be living in the States, so there didn't seem to be a lot of big point. And then when things started to ratchet up politically, I felt a bit like Cassandra in a lot of ways, before, when Biden was still president, but when this whole Project 2025 and everything was coming out, I was, they're going to be evil outside of the bounds of evil. We sort of have this like spectrum of what we think is like acceptable human behavior, and maybe there's people who do bad things, but it's within this, I want to say like how the political spectrum that we've come to expect. And when people are completely shattering that and moving outside of that, then all bets are off. And I just was very worried, and I said, we need to move this up. This is not something, and as someone who writes a lot about things that the government might not like, and we're seeing crackdowns, and obviously just in the last couple of weeks about what's happened with the press and comedians and all kinds of things, and it just felt like it was going to be I felt it was going to be an unsafe place, and I just think that the timing has all played into it. And my goal is to be very politically active here because I want Canadians to know that you're not as far removed from that as we like to think we are. We're always one bad election away, basically, from the wheels falling off, which is a terrible thing to say, but it's true. And this idea that you can other people in a way to sort of gin the mob up, to try to, making people afraid of someone who's trans when you should be making people afraid of billionaires. Like, that's who we should be afraid of. For example, if they just taxed billionaires appropriately, could fund every social program you wanted to. So I just feel that we can't rest on our laurels here in Canada. We can't say, okay, well, we have a parliamentary system, I think, does offer a little bit more protection, but we have to be incredibly vigilant. We have to be proactive. We can't be reactive.
Yes, here. People are going to want to clap for everything you said. It's going to be a 3-hour forum, but they're going to kick us out.
Well, there's a lot of people here who are like bitches from Winnipeg at heart. You know?
You're here. It's fantastic that you referenced Cassandra. We do Ransacking Troy on this stage, and we reference Cassandra in the play. And of course, Cassandra is a tragic figure because she is doomed to speak the truth and doomed to not be believed and suffers a pretty terrible fate. We know that this will not be your fate, but you are not coming to Canada to retire and watch the loons. I hope you get to do a lot of that, but you are interested in activating and engaging public service and I think the public imagination, or this is a good opportunity to bring this up. I was talking with Jen's husband a little while ago about Jen's amazing ability to name things. Her extraordinary book collection, the Menopause Manifesto, the Vagina Bible, Blood. You know, it's really good titling, guys. It's great titling. And I did a show with my friend Erin Shields, who wrote Ransacking Troy, about art models in Paris in the 1920s, and we were naked for part of the show. Sold really well, and we coined in the rehearsal process, which we used in the Ransacking Troy process, just to use your imagination. Use your imagination. Imagine, if you will, a world in the future where the kind of change you want to see is possible. And I bring that up because of the Vagenda, which is your Substack and also just sort of your realm of where you can write with the public. So I wanted to make sure I say that right up front so everyone remembers it when they leave. If you're not already subscribed to the Vagenda Substack, it is an extraordinary resource that is your personal resource for women's health. I remember encountering your work and thinking, am I allowed to know this? And when I started reading, I've got goosebumps. When I started reading Blood, and you were just explaining sophisticated, absolutely quotidian medical knowledge to me in a way that I could understand and therefore empower me, I felt like I was seeing something I wasn't allowed or supposed to see. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, every single day, that's how I got involved really with writing about women's health, because every single day in the office, I would have people come in who, I'm a tertiary care provider, so I see people who, maybe their family doc hasn't been able to help, and then they've seen a gynecologist who hasn't been able to help, and so they come to me thinking that they're, uniquely broken, that and usually it's not at all, it's that somebody's missed something along the way, or hasn't explained it in a way that the person could understand. Like, you need to be able to understand things, or people would come and they say, how did I not know that? And I just really started to sit with that, like why do people not know this? Like how do people not know this? How is this something that can just literally roll off my tongue like it's nothing? And people don't know it. And then I really just thought a lot about that. And I thought, well, because nobody teaches people about the body in school in the way you should learn about it. Like, yeah, I'm sure they teach people, everybody here probably learned how to put a condom on a banana. Like, that's super useful. I mean, you couldn't have figured that out with the package instructions. Like, I'm just saying. It goes on the foot. So there's people graduate high school knowing more about parthenogenesis and frogs than about, human biology. And the idea that the vagina is a dirty word, I'm like, well, why is that dirty and elbow isn't? And if the vagina is dirty, that means women having sex is bad. And then what does that mean? What are all those implications from just not saying those words? And so that's why I, decided to write the Vagina Bible and then got started, and then of course, we couldn't buy Google ads for that because it had the word vagina in it. I'm not kidding. And they wouldn't allow us to advertise it on Twitter and all. It was just ridiculous. And I'm like, it's just a word. And, it gets back to the fact that words have power. And what happens if you give half the population with less power? I mean, I think that's what that all means. And so I just really believe knowledge is power and leveling the playing field, and everybody should know it. Like, it's your body. Why shouldn't you know about it? It's like, So that's how I really got into it, because I just was hearing story after story in the office about how I didn't know that. And I'm like, yeah, you should know that, and I'm going to do something about that.
Thank goodness that you did. And it's right there. You can just go and read the book and then you know it. It's that easy. It's incredible, the access and empowerment and universal reach that has.
And I mean, I try to make things as accessible as possible. That's why I use a lot of analogies. I always think if I was a superhero, I'd be an analogy woman. I love analogies. But you can sometimes have too many analogies in a paragraph, and you're like, wait a minute, where are we actually here?
Oh, girl, I'm in theater. It's all metaphor. Yes, when I think about the times that you've talked about, which brings me back to very much the individual person who is suffering or struggling or scared about, is this normal? Am I normal? You write in, I think it's in Blood at the beginning about what's the official term? Menstrual diarrhea? Is that
Yeah.
Like something that, and there's this great, I don't know, since you've been in the States, if you've gotten to see any of the female comedian troops that we have here, a lot of doing great. There's this great piece where a woman's stuck on an airplane and she's up in the middle and she's surrounded by everyone and she wants to get to the bathroom because she just got her period, but also because she has to, and she talked about it in the CBC comedy sketch. And it took my breath away. I was laughing, but also kind of tears to my eyes, because I thought, and that was the first time, that was like 3 years ago, Baroness von Sketch, those fabulous ladies. Yes. And I think that was the first time as an adult woman that I was like, is that a thing that other people do? Do other people have to run to the bathroom for number 2 when they have their period? I was 44.
Yeah. No, it's, 12% of the population who menstruates, so 6% of the world population, right, if you think about it that way, has menstrual diarrhea. That's more common than asthma, but everybody's heard about asthma, right? Like, you think about all the others more common than diabetes. You start to think about all these things that is more common than, and like, that was my experience. And I just thought I didn't, because one, you don't, it's kind of like the double taboo, right? You don't talk about having a bowel movement, you talk about your period. And I remember, like, in medical school, sort of putting the pieces together and thinking, this must be related to, like, prostaglandins, because prostaglandins can cause diarrhea, and we release them when we menstruate. It must. And so I remember going and asking the guy who was giving us this lecture on prostaglandins, and I said, do you think that could cause menstrual diarrhea? And he said, well, I really thought about it, but probably. And then you start reading and you learn it's 12% of the population. And I have to say, I was like really angry that, here I was, I probably learned that it was 12% of the population, maybe sometime in residency. And I was just thinking, this is absurd that I'd never, ever heard anybody talk about it. And so that kind of became my mission, that I was like going to talk about period shits all the time.
That's the T-shirt. You can buy that T-shirt in the lobby.
Ask me about my period shits. But seriously, I remember being on a train, and train bathrooms are even worse. And just I remember planning trips around, okay, I don't think that'll be the first day of my period. This is just not going to work. And just everybody knowing about it is an important, why shouldn't people know about that?
In our play, Secret Life of a Mother, that I wrote with my pal, Hannah Moscovich, there's a scene where she talks about she had her miscarriage, but then they didn't, and this happened to me too, no one really told me that there was going to be all the hemorrhaging, for quite a while longer after. And she had the hemorrhaging hit her on the plane over to Europe. Oh. And she tells the story about going up to the stewardess and being like, I'm miscarrying, so where should I do that? Should I go to the bathroom, or do you have towels, or and this is a quotidian thing, right. Which also makes me think about the other story about Secret Life, which I've been thinking so much about in diving deep in your work. When we did that show, we went and did an interview on the CBC, and there was a woman who had seen the show, and it was her job to take us from the security door up to the booth where we were going to do the interview. And in the elevator, she said, "Can I tell you something?" "Yeah." I always wanted to be a mom. I always wanted my whole life to be a mom. I thought when I was a little girl, it was all I ever wanted. I wanted a lot of kids. And when I had my first kid, my first pregnancy and birth, it was so bad and so hard and so traumatizing that I decided that if it was really this hard, someone would have told me. Someone would have told me, if it's really this painful, if it's really this scary, if it's really this difficult, surely some of the women I know would have told me. And because they didn't, that means I'm bad at it. And then she decided not to have any more kids. And that story to me is exactly why this and why we share information, because we are so distanced from a time when the women would have told you and would have told you the truth. How much, when you're doing your work, because I know when you're a physician, you're dealing with a lot of people, you're dealing with clinical, but those personal stories, those women you must have met over the years, how does that play out in your work, in your mission?
Well, it's really interesting because while everybody's story is obviously very different, there's always a very common theme. That the common theme of not knowing or, struggling to be heard, or, medicine just not being able to meet the specific needs of, not being believed. So those are some really, very common themes. And I think that it's, we're in a system that was created by men and, to make it easier for men. And if you even just look at, obviously I'm thinking more about medicine, but if you think about just like primary care, needing to go to the doctor for whatever you need to go to the doctor for. If you have a uterus and ovaries, you have to go to the doctor more often. Because, you have, so between the ages of during your menstrual times, we'll just say between the ages of 13 and 50, right? So you're at risk for iron deficiency and heavy bleeding and cramps and endometriosis and menstrual migraines. You can talk about all these medical things that surround around the period, and people who don't have uterus don't have those things. So right away, you have a more need to go and get care. So if it's harder to get primary care, who does that disadvantage? It disadvantages the people who need to access it more. So if you just start thinking about that basic level, how even from the first entry into the system, it's a disadvantage, right? If, your primary care doctor only has 5 minutes to spend with you, solving complex problems are really difficult. Treating a sore throat, pretty easy. And so the system is designed for acute care issues. You go in, you have a sore toe, it's an infection, they give you an antibiotic. That's great. But again, all of these issues that I mentioned around the reproductive tract are all chronic issues. Those take longer than 10 minutes to talk about. And so if you just even think about how the system is structured, it's structured to disadvantage the people who need to access it most. And who are the people who need to access it most? The people with a reproductive tract. So I just think that these conversations are so important to have, because if you don't think about it that way, how many people here had thought about it that way before? Right. And so if it's not part of our conversation, then how do you change who you vote for? How do you change the system? How do you, because to me, that whole system needs to be structured differently to account for that. And so you start to see these themes running through, and it's the same, it's really interesting how stories are all different, but they're also all the same. And that the first step is, really trying to talk about it and trying to recognize, okay, well, let's go back and I hate the word root cause, because there's rarely a single root cause for anything. Where does the problem branch off, and how far can we go back so we can actually help more people?
Mm-hmm. So I would say that we know and agree that more knowledge is better, and more transparency and truth is better. I also know that with that show that we made, there was a big fear, because we talked about a lot of really hard, painful, gothic, dark. Also, it was a theater show, right? It had to be cool.
Right,
so
yeah.
we were really digging in. But there was a fear that young women would come and see the show and would make them not want to have kids and not want to be a mother. And time and time again, these young women would say, now I feel like I can do it, because I feel like you told me the truth. Now it's not a mystery. I know how hard it is. I can do that. It makes me feel strong and brave. So we know that sharing more information is better.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, so as someone who counsels people about surgeries all the time and talk about complications afterwards, no one is upset when you tell them about a potential complication. What they're upset about is if they have that complication, you don't tell them about it. So there are accepted, there are many surgeries that have an accepted complication risk. There's a 5% risk of infection after this. There is a 10% risk of wound pain. There's a 2% risk. So these are accepted complications. We can't do, that's going to happen to someone. And if you do enough surgeries, then, you're going to see it happen to people. And so, I have patients I'll say, well, yeah, I got an infection, but you told me this was a potential risk. And so I knew about that risk going in. And I think that having the knowledge so you can make an informed choice, I always keep getting back to like an informed choice, that then you're making it from a position of strength. It's something that you're doing, but something that you felt like was forced upon you. And you're like, well, wait a minute, if I'd had all the information, I might have made a different choice. Maybe not, but I would have liked to have had the opportunity. So I think people want to know more. And I think that not giving people information, again, only serves the people that are trying to maintain power, right?
Right. So, which brings me to a two-pronged question, which is, okay, we know that more knowledge is good. We know that more knowledge sharing is empowering. And what about misinformation? So now we are in a time where, I have a 12-year-old daughter. I am cresting. I can see 50 on the horizon. And I have an almost 80-year-old on the horizon mom. So I'm like your peak demographic. And I can't believe what's happened in the last 15 years in terms of what I can access. And all of a sudden, I am a menopause expert. So it's great you're here, but I'm going to tell everybody what I read on the internet in the last year about perimenopause. And it's a lot of information. And I know that this has been a priority for you, is advocating for regulation and misinformation. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think there's a big difference, first of all, between knowledge and data. And I think that we forget that sometimes. And understanding how a data point fits in requires a lot of knowledge. And so it's very easy to get scared about data, and data's not always accurate. And I think that we are really, I think, in a post-truth world. I think you have to be so careful. And then adding AI in on top of that is just this whole different level that I didn't even think about until it appeared. And so you have to be incredibly careful about what you're receiving and how you're receiving it. And because there's so much propaganda as well. And what's the problem is the very first piece of information people hear is the thing that they're more likely to believe.
Can you say that thing about repeating that you said in
so it's called the illusory truth effect. We all mistake repetition for accuracy. That's why propaganda works, right? And I always think, like, historically, I'm no anthropologist, so I'm just spitballing here, but I like to think that, 30,000 years ago, we weren't expecting the person in our collective to tell us that water was clean when it was actually dirty. We weren't expecting anybody to be, against the collective. So telling you something a couple of times or hearing it the first time and believing it would make sense. Oh, the clean water's there. Okay, gotcha. I remember that. So I'm going to go there. And so that, like I said, I'm making this up, but it sounds intuitive. And so I believe so that's why we're wired for that. So it is so hard. And, it's amazing, there was an article I was quoted in just this week in The Cut about these designer prenatal vitamins, which all have this thing called methylfolate in it. And there's no data to show that methylfolate reduces birth defects, but folic acid does. And that's why folic acid is what we recommend, because there's actually clinical trials to show that there's a reduction. So you have a thing that's been proven to be effective, that's cheaper, and you have a thing that is not proven to be effective, that is more expensive, that companies are making $200-300 million on a year, so much so that they're able to hire people like Serena Williams to have on the board and things like that, right? So that's a whole different money game. This article laid everything out, interviewed experts, the whole thing, and there were people who contacted me who were like, oh, I don't believe any of that. because I took this vitamin and I love it, and they wouldn't lie to me. And it's just, and you just think how you've had this. The reporter did a great job. She laid it out. She explained how all the money behind and how also the trad wife movement's into it, all this all explained, and it didn't matter at all. And so it's very hard to move people. And
you said something in the, if you haven't watched it, you oughta, a wonderful talk that you gave, I think, just this week on the menopause gold rush.
Oh, yeah.
So extraordinarily jam-packed with helpful information and helpful safeguards, and really do yourselves a favor. It's an hour. I watched it in the bath.
It's on my Vigenda. You can go see it there.
It's on the Vigenda. Yeah. But you talked about that in some of those tests, can you talk about placebos actually?
Yeah. So the placebo effect is really, really strong. And that doesn't mean that we make stuff up. It means like we want to get better. We're all, we're taking medication, we're wired to get better. And I talked about, so the KEEP study is one of these clinical trials that compared 2 different doses of hormone therapy against placebo. And, if you look at the outcome metrics, and one of the outcome metrics was irritability. How does the medication affect irritability? And of course, 25% of people were irritable before they started the medication. I'm like, really? Only 25?
The other 75 are lying.
Well, but this was pre-Trump's entry into politics, so maybe people were like a little bit more chill, because the temperature's been ratcheted up just a little. So 25%, and of course, on hormone therapy, whatever, like 2% of people were irritable, but it was the same for placebo. It was, if you look at the graphs, it's like identical. The dropping. And so that's why it's super important that, one, we track things, that we ask questions, but that's why it's so easy for supplements to appear like they're beneficial, because even with hot flashes, placebo helps 50% of people. Like, it's pretty profound, the placebo effect, and it lasts actually quite a long time. So it's really important that people have the right knowledge about these products so you can make an informed choice, because if it's a placebo, maybe you might want to know, because then maybe you're not going to take this product. But when they're unstudied, when they're untested, you just don't know. And I think that there's absolutely no sort of burden of proof, with supplements. I mean, the United States is awful. Health Canada is trying here, and there's been actually, since they had an independent auditor's report in 2021, because there have been all these reports of like lead in prenatal vitamins, I'm not kidding, melatonin that had, anywhere between 5% and 500% of what was on the label in the packaging, bought from Guelph, which I found really funny when this was reported in the States, because they called Guelph Toronto. I'm like, well, not really. Not really. Purchased in a Toronto pharmacy. Okay. And so they're really trying to make it better, but there's been so much pushback. And I think that what people don't realize is it's so interesting when they interview people about it, they think that regulating supplements is about greed. And I'm like, okay, but no, not in the way that you're thinking. It's not like the greedy government. It's not greedy pharma. It's if somebody's saying that they can't make a product in a safe way, that it's too expensive to do that, should they be making that product? Like, really, like if you're buying a car and they can't guarantee you that the seatbelts work, should that company be allowed to make that car? Probably not. And so, or maybe you need to raise your price, but that's the whole thing is, right? Supplements have this very low entry price point, and I'm not here to like defend big pharma, but it is expensive to do things correctly. You have to have the right equipment. You have to be willing to batch test. You have to be willing to test for, bacterial contaminants and mold. So it is expensive to do it correctly, not as expensive as they're charging, but you can't do it on the cheap. And so there's been this massive pushback, and I think it's just really important. That's one of the things I'm hoping to become involved with when I come back, is to try to have some kind of involvement with Health Canada, because I really think consumers deserve that kind of protection. You should know if you're purchasing something off the shelf that it contains what it claims, that it's free of bacterial contaminants, and that it can do what it claims, or it shouldn't be allowed to make any claims. So
I remember you saying in the Gold Rush about we have a kind of thing where there's pharma and then there's natural products, which is a huge umbrella, which has just everything.
It's got everything in it from probiotics to toothpaste.
Yeah.
I know, right? You're like, really? And alcohol hand sanitizers. And so, it's very easy. Like, I mean, I think a lot of people don't even know that, for example, in Canada, like every supplement should have an NPN number. So at least it's been registered. But apparently like 25% of products on the shelves don't even have an NPN number. So so even that like base level of information, we should be educating people about that. I mean, that's really the government's job, to be explaining, if they're going to regulate something, how people can get safer care.
Mm-hmm. I know that you're interested in if there's anyone here who has connections at Health Canada and would be interested in hooking Dr. Gunter up so she can save us all, that would be really helpful. I'm also just throwing out there, you don't have to keep to Health Canada. You could also get politically involved, because I would like to zoom out a little bit, which is follow the money. So why are there only NPN numbers on 25% of them? Why is there such kickback? Just zoom us out and talk a little systemically about.
Yeah, I mean, it's lobbying. It's, people not thinking it's a serious enough political issue. And then when I know that the Trudeau government actually really tried to do some things about this. And they said they had more pushback about regulating supplements than about any other thing they got involved with. They were unprepared for it. And I said, well, you should have called me. I would have filled you in. It is, money from supplements drives sort of this wheel of wellness. And it's really fascinating when you look at the link between supplements and conspiracy theories. So when you think about, this whole like MAHA movement in the United States and all this, all this kind of
MAHA make America healthy again.
All right. Yeah, because taking away vaccines is sure the first step there. I mean, honestly, so it is really like we're in some kind of, I feel like we're in some mirror reality or something. But I know we're not, which makes us sad. So what happens is, it's really fascinating. There was this study published about 10 years ago that shows the more conspiracy theories people believe, the more likely they are to buy supplements, which is really fascinating, right? So, and conspiracy theories like AIDS was created by Big Pharma, like that kind of conspiracy theory, like that level. And the more you believe, the more you're likely to buy. And then when you start thinking about how people who sell supplements, it's always like, this is what they're keeping from you, right? There's a lot of conspiracy theory coded language in it. And then it really sort of solidified during the Alex Jones trial. Everybody knows who he is, right? This like awful, terrible right-wing person who spread this whole awful lie about the Sandy Hook murders, right? All those school children that were killed. And when he started to talk about Sandy Hook being like a lie, that there was crisis actors, his supplement sales spiked. This all came out in the court records. And the more he leaned into conspiracy theories, the more they sold supplements. And I would say if there's one thing that you leave here with this today, is that when you're seeing somebody pushing a supplement, start thinking about like, how are they talking about the natural guidelines? Are the national guidelines? Are they saying like the government's hiding things from you? Is Health Canada hiding things from you? Is this a treatment they don't want you to have? The language is very subtle at the beginning, but that's, I think, how a lot of people sort of get entry into this. And then all of a sudden, in a year, they're not taking chemotherapy for the cancer, right? And these are the kinds of things that we see. I mean, I see people who have refused cancer care and gone to Arizona to get IV vitamins, and now they've finally agreed to have their cancer treated, and they required a much bigger surgery, and now they have a complication. That means they have to come to see somebody like me. And we see all of this awful downstream, and whether it's not thinking that folic acid in prenatal vitamins is some kind of like conspiracy theory, but the natural folate, which is unstudied, isn't, and it just becomes all messed up. And when there's so much chaos, and I think that when you talk about, there's a lot of overlap, I think, between like dictatorships and how the world of wellness works. And the goal is to create chaos and to throw so much data and stuff at you that you just don't even know where you are, and you're so disoriented by it that you don't really know what the truth is anymore. And so I just think it's super important that people have that awareness when they're looking at products like supplements and that link with conspiracy theories.
And so we know that there's no panacea, and I was thinking about this in a kind of story, Jane Doe kind of way. I thought, okay, if I wasn't the one on stage, but I was attending today, really me as Mev, I could see myself being like, I can't wait to go and see Dr. Gunter speak. I really hope that she says like the one thing I really need to know to just fix this perimenopause thing and my irritability and the patriarchy. And like if she could just, if it's like something I should be adding to my diet, or and I thought it's interesting because I think we were kept in the dark for so long that okay, I'd be interested, if you wouldn't mind self-disclosing your age, if there are people here who are, say, above the age of 50, can you raise your hand if you... I'm not going to get personal, but was menopause talked about when you were less than 50? Is this a surprise? Was this something like, yes, in women's circles or... Your family, yay on them, yay. Mostly women in the family, yeah. What and what was it? Because for me, it feels like there was silence for hundreds of years, and then in the last 10 years, all this noise. And I think my story of that is that, of course I want to take all the supplements because all of a sudden it's like a flush, as you said, chaotic flush of information and hope that, oh my God, this thing is happening to me and there's something I can do about it. Finally, something I can do about it. And so of course I want to do all the things. What do I do when faced with that amount of hope and energy and chaos? What do you think?
So I would say, this sounds like a bad pun, but take a pause. Because we're in a different time of information sharing than we were even 10 years ago. And I think that if you think about the first piece of information that you have being the one you're more likely to believe, you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself and that you're thinking about how you're strategically getting information. And I get it, like when there's something new or there's something like we all want to jump in and get that stuff, but it's always, in everything we do in life, it's always worth putting the time in to invest to do it correctly. And instead of kind of being a passive consumer on social media, to step back and say, okay, how am I going to learn about this? Where am I going to go? How am I going to fact check what I'm hearing? Because it's so easy in the age of influencers, because influencers have influence, right? You believe what they say, to say, okay, I'm going to take that, but I'm going to be really, I'm going to be really impartial about that, and I'm going to go and look and see. If you're finding people where they're not lining up with society guidelines, like the Canadian Menopause Society has guidelines, the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada has guidelines, the Menopause Society in the States, the Australasian Menopause Society, and all of these. I actually have a lot of links to these guidelines on just on the link tree on my Instagram. Go and check. And in this age of misinformation, if people are sharing incorrect information, don't you want to protect yourself against that? Think about how you're accessing information. So that would be my very first thing, would be strategic about it. And my second thing, which nobody wants to hear, and I don't want to hear it, is the one thing that answers everything is exercise. I'm sorry. I don't want to, I hate that answer as much as everybody else. So I became a runner again about a year ago. I started lifting weights. I'm a runner who hates the whole time I'm running. I feel great afterwards, though. Afterwards, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I did it. But during it, I'm like, fuck, like the whole time. And I think we need to hear more honest stories from people who hate exercise.
Yes. That's a whole forum event, just a panel of people who hate exercise.
But if you think about what exercise does, it reduces your risk of heart disease, reduces your risk of diabetes, it's good for your bones, it's good for your mental health, it reduces your risk of dementia. When you think it helps your sleep, when you think about every single symptom in menopause or a health condition that might increase your risk of, it basically helps everything except hot flashes, like everything except hot flashes. So you're talking about a massive brush for that. And also, if you're talking about fighting the patriarchy, isn't it better to be strong? Isn't it better to feel powerful? Isn't it better to stand taller? Isn't it better to sort of feel good about yourself, like the confidence from that? So, I mean, I grew up in the age of participation. Was that what it was
Yes.
called? Right? And we used to get those awful like gold, silver, and bronze. And of course, I just always got the participation thing.
Yeah. Me too.
Because I was, and that how damaging that was actually for me, because I just felt I was bad at exercise, so why do it? And I didn't understand the health implications. So I came to it a lot later in life, and that is the one regret I have, that I did not get into exercising, at a much earlier age and understanding how that affects everything. And so I would say that, it's not a pill. I wish it was. If I had the pill, I would sell it to you. No, I wouldn't actually, because I wouldn't do that. But I would tell you where you could get a safe one. But yeah,
you
that's
did
the one
say
thing.
something about in the Gold Rush about the three pillars and like the tests and the data of like, okay, this thing worked or did not work, but are you doing the exercise that you talked about these pillars? I think you said exercise. Exercise
So,
what you eat. Yeah.
So there's this great study called SWAN, which is the study of women's health across the nation from the United States. And it was kind of the brainchild of a couple of amazing researchers who in the 1990s were like, we don't even really know what happens during the menopause transition, so we should study it. And they managed to get money from the NIH for this. They follow this massive sort of ethnically diverse group of women, basically from when they're menstruating regularly all the way through, like what's happening to hormones, what's happening to weight, what's happening to bone density, like we need to know what's happening before we can actually design anything, right? You need to know the basics. And in one of the offshoot studies, they were looking at sort of the three pillars. Like if you're talking about like the entry level into health, so the three pillars are, getting the recommended amount of exercise, eating, a healthy diet, which can mean lots of different things, right? So it doesn't have to be like a Mediterranean diet. There's all different kinds of very healthy diets to have, and not smoking. And if you look at those three pillars, only 12% of women were doing all three, right? So then you think about all these things like supplements, and so many of these things are distraction because they're not going to undo any of that stuff. And I think sometimes it even distracts people. Like I've wrote recently about creatine, and everybody hears that that's how it's not the miracle thing. Nothing's the miracle thing. Exercise is. I don't hear that, but it's true. All of these things, think about the effort it takes to buy that all the time, to take something every single day. You're devoting that mental energy to doing that thing. And what if you devoted that mental energy to something else that you're going to get a better bang for your buck? I mean, if you're a weightlifter, you may very well get the advantages, some small advantages from creatine, absolutely. But if you're just taking it and not doing that, then you're just distracting yourself from this low-hanging fruit that's there.
I love this. I think as I mature, I start to understand it also as in midlife when you start experiencing more losses and more grief, and you start thinking about how much time we actually have on this floating rock, that the idea of allocating that energy where it is biggest bang for buck is so profound. Because I do think there's something about the tremendous consumption of the age that we live in now that also just teases us into thinking we have infinite time, and those time and energy resources saying, I've spent way more time researching what I'm supposed to be doing than just doing something that I basically know is good for me.
Right.
And the three pillars you talked about in the not smoking, eating a healthy diet. You said psyllium husk so many times in that.
What people want is fiber supplement. So, so the new thing is designer fibers, like all these it's got this prebiotic, or it's got whatever banana powder or green pepper powder. I don't know. I'm just making that stuff up. It's just got other stuff in that makes it sound like more food-like, right? I'm like, well, you could also eat food. And so But if you look at the types of fiber, there's all different kinds of fiber, and the types of fiber that gives you the most bang for your buck is psyllium husk, which is Metamucil, and I'm sure Costco has a version, right? So so I'm all about like who wants to waste their money on those products when there's shoes to buy? So it's all about allocation of resources.
Okay, we're just going to take a TO to talk about these shoes. So these shoes are, Jen, tell us about their shoes.
Well, I am modeling for you John Fluvog's Dr. Gunter shoe.
They are Dr. Gunter shoes. They are named after her.
They are. You
can buy these shoes.
They come in 3 colorways. And I learned that. That's what they call different. I'm like, oh, it's a colorway. Oh, I like that. Yes, so these are, so about 2 years ago, John Fluvog approached me because I'm a huge fan. I wear a lot of his shoes, and I've been wearing his shoes since like the 90s, right? Yeah, I know. Who doesn't love Fluvogs? There's so much whimsy, and I have a size 11. So for me, growing up in Winnipeg, every shoe store, like they just had a size 10. I was like, that's awesome. I didn't know shoes were supposed to fit. Talk about things you didn't know. I thought like toes were supposed to be curled at the end. And so I was able, so I was a resident, and I remember saving up all this money and then, going to the Fluvog store and getting a pair of big clunky black shoes. And it was just like my dream. And anyway, so I've always been wearing Fluvogs, and I always tag them. And they reached out to me a couple of years ago and said, can we design a shoe for you? And I was like, yeah, that's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. Fuck the kids. Like, I got and they're comfy too. And so anyway, and then a percentage of the proceeds goes to, I think the charity is called Moon Sisters. They make sure that they serve Indigenous populations to try to help make sure that menstrual products are available at a more, accessible price. Because which is a huge issue that we don't talk about. Like, you should not be paying more for your tampons if you live in, a rural community than if you live in downtown Toronto. Like, I really believe, like, if we're saying that milk should be available to everybody, bread should be available, that there should be there should be products that are protected. I actually believe that menstrual products, and while we're on it, incontinence products as well, that those should be available, because nobody ever talks about incontinence, but it's really important to talk about. That those things should be, that the government has a vested interest. I mean, people miss school because of menstrual poverty. People don't leave the house because of incontinence. If we think about all the ways that this could negatively affect our society, like, our government's here to make our lives better. That's what they're here for. And I don't mind paying my tax dollars when it actually does that, So, I just feel like that would be something that we need to have more equity on.
You have a great story in Blood about being a teenage girl and biking to buy your pads, and the boxes
to come in.
What do you compare it to? The size of
it's the size of a carry-on suitcase. So I got seriously. So I used to use these. I think it was I can't remember what brand it was, but it was the box I needed was this mustard yellow, and it had a dandelion that was blowing in the wind. Like, how is that even a menstrual analogy? Like, what is that? How is that? Like, I'm shedding the lining. It's shedding. I don't know. And anyway, so I used to like to ride my 10-speed to the store, and the days the pads were like this thick, a super plus size, super heavy periods. Right? It was like sitting on a box of Kleenex, right? You remember. And so the box was like huge to get 30 pads. And I got really obsessed, and I found a box on Etsy from like 1980 something, and I paid like $30 for it to have it shipped, and measured it, and it's the size of a carry-on suitcase.
Oh my God.
That's how big the boxes were.
Oh my God. I thought you were exaggerating, but you were.
I go down. I'm like, go down. If I'm going down a rabbit hole, I'm going all the way. I'm going to the bottom. I'm going to see what's there.
To the benefit of us all.
Right.
My daughter was in grade 6 last year, and she came home and she said the pads they put, at least now they're putting pads in the girls' washrooms, which is great. But she said they're too big. Like if you're wearing tight pants, like you need big ones for some, early menstruators might have a heavy flow, but some of them are just too big, like physically too big for these little bodies. And so she and her friend opened one and stuck it to the wall of the bathroom and wrote, "These are too big," on the pad. And I was like, you have a really understanding, wonderful principal. You could have just told him. Like, you didn't need to go full gorilla. But in those pillars you talked about, the not smoking, the good diet, and what's the third one?
Exercise.
Exercise.
We all want to forget.
I'm not sure. I'm going to question you on that. No. There were two others that you mentioned. One was limiting alcohol.
Oh, yeah.
And the other one was community.
Yeah. Yeah, if we think about all the things that are really good for us, and, community is super important for, just keeping us happy, but also actually for dementia prevention. Alcohol as well, limiting alcohol intake, alcohol is a carcinogen, and I don't want to hear that either. It is associated with dementia and other things. I talked a lot about brain health and in that, and, people always want to look at, getting the shingles vaccine. There's really some very strong, it's observational evidence, but it's strong observational evidence linking it with a lower risk of dementia, which is super important because when women get shingles, they're more likely to get it and more likely to have severe shingles. So the vaccine's not any fun. I'm going to tell you, you just have to plan the weekend for the second dose and suck it up and see if you're the one who's going to get. And you may not get the bad side effects, but this is one of the things about warned in advance, right? If you know that you might have a terrible 24 hours afterwards, well, then, you just tune up the Netflix and then go from there, because everybody's canceled Disney Plus, right?
When you come home to us and you want to get more involved, what would be your first thing you want to tackle? What do you think? What is your priority right now?
Well, I think that I really feel that misinformation is such a massive issue. And I feel that the financial link between supplements and that is so strong. It's probably less strong up here. But I do feel that's something that I would, be really interested in working on. But I don't know. I think I'm just going to have to see what opportunities come. You just never know. I like to be open to things because you just never know what's going to walk through the door, and just see where I can be really, really useful. I mean, I've been, seeing people one-on-one in the office for 30 years, and I think I have a lot of great knowledge to think about how could I help people more on a broader scale. I still might be involved in some kind of clinical care. One thing that I'm really interested in is trying to improve access to care in more rural communities, because when you live in downtown Vancouver, and I know it's hard to get access to healthcare in lots of different places, but it's a whole different level when you're somewhere that's even far away, and there's so much, again, low-hanging fruit that I think could go to a lot of other places. So I think I'm really interested in trying to correct health disparities.
Beautiful. Let's all call our Health Canada people and get that happening.
Oh, and can I just say one thing?
Yes, please.
So one thing that really irritates, I think it's a lot of things irritate me, but
there's a pill you can take for that. It's a placebo, but it works.
It works.
It's amazing.
Exactly. Exactly. Is this idea that here we are in a country where our tax dollars are paying for our health care, right? So unlike a lot of other places, the government really has a vested interest. And so why do we not have educational models produced by Health Canada? Why can't we not have a module on menstruation that can be translated into every language, so no matter where you live, you can go to the public library if you don't have access to the internet, and you can get access to that module? Why don't we have a module on pregnancy? Why don't we have a module on heart disease? Why don't we have a module on menopause? I just feel that people want to learn in a more interactive way, and I'm sure it's written out somewhere on Health Canada somewhere, but people want to sort of progress through, I think, in that kind of way. And I just feel that and some people are visual learners, some people want to hear it. And I just feel that there should be more investment on a government level about how to get everybody access to that same information, especially when we're talking about how, education is provincial, right? And there are places now in Alberta where people are, the little access to learning about your body that is there is now being taken away. And I really feel that it's the federal government's responsibility to make sure that everybody has the information about your body. Shouldn't be political. That's about equity. And so I just feel that that's something that the federal government should be doing.
Okay, they get to ask
Yes.
questions now, and this is the first question, and I love this question. Dr. Gunter, you have sons. Can you talk about the role of a mother of boys in educating them about women's issues and the way to bring them up as women's supporters?
Yeah, so I have two great boys, Oliver and Victor, and they've just always been around me talking, because I've got books open with pictures of vaginas, and there's just it's all over the house. There's a vulva puppet. There's pictures our Christmas tree topper is an angry uterus. I'm not kidding, which they love. So they've just been around it and talked about it in a way that just you would talk about anything. So they're really very informed, and it's real. So they actually had very good sex education in their middle school, which they're part of. I'm in this extremely liberal small part of Northern California, and so they had this incredible program. And so the woman was just taking a gauge of the room and asking them, so what you just want to see what people's levels knowledge about or comfort level talking about, and does anybody want to share any experiences? And so Oliver put his hand up and said, "My mom wrote about her vagina for the New York Times." And she said, "Okay, well, you're on the more comfortable aspect of things." And when we talked about dating, I said, I really don't have any, you can date whoever you want, but they at least have to have had the HPV vaccine. And they were like, "Oh, Mom, as if we'd hang out with an anti-vaxxer." And Oliver keeps in his little apartment in Ottawa. He has tampons and pads for anyone who comes to visit. I know, right? So anyway, so yeah.
Do that.
So
just do that.
You can just having pads or tampons in your bathroom in your house, so people who come to visit, anybody can just see it out there. I just think that's a small scale thing. But yeah, so I just think the open and the honesty is really important. I think when you hide things from kids, it makes them think that they want to try it or that it's special, or or something that they should experiment with in some kind of way that they would be unsafe. And I just so yeah, just talk about it like it's nothing, because then it's a lot easier.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about this before, actually, but it just also on the boys' side, or wet dreams and all the weird things that happen to boys too. It's just to take the stigma away.
Yeah, it's important to talk about.
I just auditioned for a TV show. This is totally on topic, but that's set in the 1980s, and she's explaining how babies are made to a group of girls, and she says, "Don't worry, the boys," or one of the girls says, "Will the boys get dyslexia?" And she said, "Theirs will be different." And
of course.
Why? Because boys are different, and it's just wild in terms of the taboo. When we were doing that show, Secret Life, and I told you this, I think, that I had researched the word taboo. Mm-hmm. And one of the definitions I found was set aside as sacred. That things that are taboo are actually set aside as sacred. So I feel like so much of what you do is you open the door and show the sacred, quotidian, normal thing to
yeah, I mean, saying things are sacred is a great way of saying, well, you can't have access to that knowledge, right? Yeah. Religions, most of them are patriarchal, and who doesn't get access to that knowledge? The women. And so yeah, I think democratizing knowledge is the most important thing, and making sure it's knowledge, not data.
Our society is designed to reinforce the idea that the male body is the normative body. Growing up, I felt I had to adapt myself to an environment that wasn't designed to take on the consideration, the specific needs of my female body. What can we do to advance the idea that the female body is normative and change things, society, so it reflects this?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, again, knowledge, talking about things, but demanding change and saying, why do we not have equal funding for these two things? Why are we at this disadvantage? Why are, if there's going to be a model of something, there needs to be, representative models. And I think that it's very true that this has been the case. And I think it just takes, sometimes it takes a little bit of momentum to get things going, but I think everybody is probably in agreement to this. And so it's just a matter of how do we enact the change on a systematic or on a national level type thing. But even everybody has an opportunity to make a difference, in your own small environments, right? So if it's in a classroom, in a school, in a place of work, there's all kinds of places. I mean, even again, just making sure there's pads and tampons in every bathroom is a great way of just saying hey, people actually menstruate, and have it just, so I think that there's a lot of opportunities for people to work on that.
I like it. My mother's a librarian, and
I love librarians. They're superheroes.
They're the heroes. Yeah, they are the best. And that kind of community access and fighting to keep our libraries and fighting to keep them from being closed down. Remember when they were all going to close down there for a minute?
Yeah. Libraries are I think they're one of the greatest things governments can do for the people, having access to everything. And also too, because now that I can't have Disney Plus, I can get Andor on DVD from the library. So I think but having a community, a place to go, librarians, every librarian I have ever met has been incredibly knowledgeable, but just incredibly open about how can we get this knowledge to the community? How can we do events? How can we do those types of things? And so yeah.
That's the thing, the community piece of the actual connection between the community piece and specifically women's health and knowledge sharing. And I frequently, I gather groups of women wherever I live because I need them to survive. And I have one group that I call the witches, one group the sirens, the queens, and we have regular knowledge sharing sessions, and it's so glorious. And I often find that it's a bit of a cliche, but that I'm saying to my husband, do the same. How do you get together with your guys and talk about the things you should eat for your prostate health? Boy, I would love it if you would. Those lycopenes, get in those lycopenes. But the community mission of the library and the community knowledge sharing, this module that you're talking about, this idea that there could be modules available at the library to teach about these absolute life crosses of the female health journey.
Or just information about the body. I probably lots of people don't really know how their kidneys work either, or how your heart, these things. And when you hear that, you're like, oh, that's why I should do that. Oh, it makes a lot of sense, right? If you understand about how cholesterol is formed, or what are the specific things that that you need to know about, whatever shingles vaccine. There's so many different things. Just the more people know about things, the better. And I just feel that I just feel the government should have more. They have a vested interest in making sure people know about their health, because one, people should want to be healthy, but two, if you just think about it from a money standpoint, if you're not spending money on things that people could have taken care of because they had the information, wouldn't that have been better?
Mm-hmm. Women with peri or menopausal symptoms are encouraged to go on HRT. HRT, the word I have heard more in the last year than any other word. Well, I guess it's 3 letters. But what if estrogen causes blood clots? Can you be on progesterone only? This is actual medical.
So menopause hormone therapy, which is the term we like to use now, because hormone replacement therapy implies there's a disease, and menopause isn't a disease. It's not a disease that your ovaries stop ovulating. That is the evolutionary plan. That's just how it is. And so I just think that's an important term, the important sort of switch to think about it. We don't encourage everybody to go on menopause hormone therapy. It is the gold standard treatment for hot flashes. It's the gold standard treatment for night sweats, and it is effective at preventing osteoporosis for those at risk. But many of the other things people hear about it online have really not been studied. And so, I think that there's a lot of grand claims made, and some of it's based on some observational data, some of it's weaker, and I just think it's important to be honest about what the data shows and what it doesn't show. For people who can't take it because of a history of blood clots, it would depend on a lot of things, and so for the majority of people, we think that that the progesterone-only therapies are fine, but they're not really very effective at treating symptoms, so there are other non-hormonal therapies that I would think about over that, and this obviously isn't individual medical advice, but for example, progesterone alone is not that effective for hot flashes. So there's probably more effective non-hormonal medications, new neurokinin 3 receptor antagonists group that I'm thinking about.
I feel like we heard about a lot of things that are really good at for everything but hot flashes.
Yeah, and estrogen is the gold standard, but there's other drugs as well. And I think that this is one thing that it's really important that not everybody wants to take hormones and not everybody can take hormones. And there's several provinces that have stepped up and said, oh, we're going to offer menopause hormone therapy free on the pharmacare. That's great, except you're leaving out all the people who can't take that. And that's not acceptable. If you're going to make menopause hormone therapy or one type of menopause hormone therapy free, you need to make a non-hormonal therapy that's effective free as well. Because then it just tells that, if you've had breast cancer, what is this? Too bad, suck it up, sister. Is that what you're saying? Because that's actually what I hear when I say that. So, and I've reached out to a couple of, places that have been doing that. I reached out to the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada when they were, announcing that a couple of different provinces were doing this. But I just think it's really important that people have to sit back and say, like, we have to bring everybody along. We can't just bring part of the population along because we're a community and we need to look out for everybody.
I'd like to point out something under that vein of bringing everyone along. One of the things I appreciate so much, you said early on in our conversation that words are important, and you do such an extraordinary job at the beginning of the book Blood about language, and that language is, of course, always evolving in the theater. This is, this is what we do, is play with language, and you do a very helpful job of breaking down why you use what terms you use in the book. And I just wanted to acknowledge that there are probably some trans folks here with us today, and you do a fabulous job of being very clear about this being an inclusive book and an inclusive realm of knowledge. And part of that being that you trust the consumer or the reader to know what applies to them and what doesn't. So
yeah, I mean, when I say woman, I'm meaning everybody who identifies as a woman, and you know what part of what I'm saying, if that applies to you, and if you, I don't really write about men, so I can't really say about that. But if you think about it, you know what applies to you, and I mean, for example, when you're talking about menstruation, you might have had a hysterectomy. Okay, well that doesn't apply to you anymore. Maybe you're someone who has a hormonal IUD. That doesn't apply to you. If you're a trans woman, that doesn't apply to you. That's okay. I trust that women are smart enough to know what part of the message it applies to them or what part doesn't. Like if I was up here talking about pregnancy and you're not pregnant, you'd be like, okay, that doesn't apply to me. I don't have to spell that out. So I think that we should be using inclusive terms and we don't, getting everybody along the ride. And as I mentioned, I think I mentioned this before outside, the only class of people we should be othering are the billionaires. So, because that's the 1% that's actually harming people. So I think that's my political take on that.
This is very practical. I usually go to the Mayo Clinic on Cleveland Clinic for info. Are they still a reliable source? Do you see this changing?
It's very difficult to say that one place is reliable because, they can write great content about one thing and maybe get something else wrong. And, the Mayo, if you think, well, the Mayo Clinic's website, what does that exist with? To support the Mayo Clinic. And what is, so they want you to come there, so it's just important to think about, fact checking. And that's why I think it's always good to start with the Medical Professional Society. And that's something that we don't really talk about. But, there is a Canadian Society for Nephrology, like if you're interested in kidneys, an American Society or an International Interventional Society, there's cardiology societies, there's menopause societies, and many of them do a really, really good job at having patient information. And I always say that's actually the best place to start, because you're getting it from, you know, a less biased source. It's always funny, like when you go and I look up whatever on this university website or that, and of course they're highlighting their research. Well, of course, like why wouldn't you? And so if research from that institution supports a very specific thing, even though maybe there's some controversy, of course they're going to highlight that because it's research from their institution, right? We all have bias, and it's a really important thing to acknowledge. But when you're thinking about how medical societies put information together, they're like, you know, everybody's got to disclose their bias. You're having a group of people coming from lots of different sort of medical walks. And so that's why I'm a big believer in starting there. And a really great, like, I hate the word hack, but a great hack is if you're putting something in a search engine. So for example, if you want to look something about menopause, if you're like treatment for hot flashes, just add afterwards Canadian Menopause Society or Menopause Society. And then right away, it will force the content from that professional society to come to the top. And so it's just the greatest way. So like whenever I'm starting with a new topic, that's often what I do to be like, hey, what does the society say about this? And I work backwards from there and kind of use that as like your source document where you're kind of vetting things onwards.
That's a genius hack. That's a hack. I'm sorry, but you have to exercise. That's a hack. You have to read all of Dr. Gunter's books and you have to join the Vagenda. That's a hack. You have to fight the billionaires and you have to vote appropriately and get this genius back in Canada and have her help take care of ourselves. That's a hack.
Support your libraries.
Support your libraries. That's a hack. And we have to let you go. So I need any final hacks.
Yeah, I would say that, boy, that's like really putting me on the spot here.
Yeah. That's the whole point.
Buy Canadian. Yeah, I would just say be really, really mindful of sources of information right now, especially. And when you're thinking about sharing content that you see online, vet it first. It's so easy to hit like reshare, whatever, and to get the vitriol and everything going. And I just think like taking that pause and saying, is this accurate? And what am I contributing to the national conversation by sharing this? And so just to kind of think about that. And because, you know, it's so easy to get caught up in the moment. And it's so easy to, and so I always try to think like, what am I mindfully trying to do with this? Am I trying to raise awareness? I'm trying to move away from the mob mentality and trying to be like, how could this be how would this be constructive? Is it constructive to know why something's happened? Yeah, that's super constructive. But is that information that I'm getting accurate, that I'm sharing? Because the last 2 or 3 weeks, the number of times I've hit share and then been like, wait a minute, maybe I should just double check that and been like, and then, you know, of course, deleted it. But I just think that we're really in this time where it is so hard to know what is accurate, and it's really, really worth learning the skill to pause and double check. And I think that just accounts like for any information that we're sharing about anything.
Got it? Two final things I want to say, and one is that there is a book signing in the lobby. Dr. Gunter will be there. Please, now is probably not the time to show her a picture of your vagina and ask her what's strange about it.
It'll be wonderful. All vaginas are wonderful.
All vaginas are wonderful. But if you are going to get your book signed, we just ask that you be mindful of the people behind you who may have a matinee of Anne of Green Gables to get to. And so to keep please moving. But it is... this is the highlight of my year. I can't thank you enough for being with us today, and I thank you on behalf of all of us for your stalwart transparency and fighting the good fight, and we are very, very grateful, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to keep up with the lively conversations and original performances on the Stratford Festival streaming service, Stratfest at Home. And for making it this far in the episode, enjoy 1 month for free. Visit stratfestathome.ca and enter code FREEMONTH. It takes you, our listeners, to make this possible. It also takes the support of our dear collaborators. Support for the Meighen Forum is generously provided by Kelly and Michael Meighen and the T.R. Meighen Family Foundation. Original score for the Everyday Forum podcast was provided by Hilary Adams. Production support is provided by the film production and distribution team at the Stratford Festival. That is coordinator Vilma Mancini and director Jenna McGaw. The Meighen Forum team is producing assistant Renata Hansen, associate coordinator James Hyatt, manager Gregory McLaughlin, and director Julie Miles. Special thanks to Mike Duncan, Greg Doherty, and Harper Charlton. Finally, thanks to artistic director Anthony Cimolino and executive director Anita Gaffney. From here in Stratford, Ontario, on the land of the Neutrals and the Anishinaabe, see you next time. Ba Ma Pi.